Hi everyone, welcome to my review of Jonathan Mostow's Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. This was made in 2003, of course, and yes, as you've seen on my channel, if you've been on it, I reviewed Terminator Salvation, and I thought it was an awful film. There are defenders out there, fine, whatever, if you like it, that's fine, but I really hated Terminator Salvation, and of course I've been rewatching the Terminator films, all of them this time, because I've not rewatched. I hadn't rewatched Terminator 3 and Salvation for years. Unlike 1 and 2, which I watch a lot, and I absolutely love both of them. Haven't seen Genesis yet, which will probably be seen, in a couple of weeks within that time. But I'll review Terminator 3 today, and yeah, this is a film that I didn't watch too much as a kid, really. Unlike 1 and 2, I loved them films as a kid. And I still love them, even more so now. But Terminator 3 I never really, loved. I enjoyed some of it, but revisiting it, there's not a strong fan base really for this film. There are some that say it's underrated, but generally it's not. It's probably the least popular Terminator film, you could say, or Genesis as well. But to be honest, all the 3, 4, and 5, they're all unpopular by a lot of people. But this has got the lowest on IMDb. It's got a 6.3. It's got 70% on Rotten Tomatoes, though, which is quite good actually. I think that's overrated in this film, and a 6.3, even then, that's pretty overrated in this film, because on the rewatch, I couldn't quite believe, how bad this film was, and this was obviously before I watched Salvation again. Salvation is worse than this, I think. I think this is better than Salvation, but really it's not praised because I still think this is a bad film. The opening even is very generic voiceover. Just as well, just latching on to what happened in Terminator 1, 2, and stuff. The new John Connor was played by Nick Stahl. Really, really poor casting choice, I think. Very, very bad in this film. Really, at no point does he feel like he's got any sort of a presence. This is not John Connor. Really is, once again they ruin most of the characters. Arnold returns as the Terminator, once again the good guy, but early on they're adding parody stuff to it. Humour. There's again calls back to Terminator 2 as well, with the bike and everything, the glasses. Really, really annoying, terrible humour. The humour in this film really does not work at all. To be honest, and there's not much of it really. It's just quite a lifeless film. It takes itself very, very seriously, which is fine if you're actually believing in what's going on and you're invested. In this film, I couldn't get invested in the characters at all. Nick Stahl, as I say, not good. Claire Danes is even worse, I think. She plays Kate, and basically you find out that pretty early on that she's like his future wife, and that the Terminator has to kind of save them, both of them. And yeah, it basically turns into, after the first 20-25 minutes, turns into this really, really generic road trip for the most of the part, for most of the film, and then the final act is it's got some of the highs of the film, but really the highs don't reach anything too much. And yeah, but there's still a lot of crap stuff at the end, and the action in this film, there's one of the action scenes, early on in the film, and it's this chase involving this truck and everything, and they're in the van and stuff. Very, very lifeless chase, unfortunately. Not filmed in a dynamic way. The editing is really flat in this film. Just to sum this film up, it once again it feels like a B grade version. It kind of feels like a straight to DVD film, even though the budget was massive for this film, I believe. And yeah, it did not feel like there was any money involved. This really felt like a rip-off, a low budget film, rip-off of the Terminator 2. It was hard to believe the budget of this film is very high, because the effects are terrible. All the CGI is awful. And really, as well, the action is just so lackluster in this film, and the CGI on the Terminator as well. In this, for this film, we've got the villain is played by Kristanna Loken, I believe, and she's the TX in this film. Very original, of course. And yeah, she's a crap Terminator, unfortunately. I never liked her as a kid. I always thought it was a bit off. Her, her acting and stuff. Really, really poor choice for to be a Terminator. She just does not have any charisma. When this comedy injected into her character, it doesn't work at all, and she's just another boring kind of portrayal. Nothing like Robert Patrick in Terminator 2. He played an absolutely stunning villain, one of the best really. She's a poor villain in this film, and just everything. All the characters in the film are so one note and generic. And her father as well, Claire Danes' father, David Andrews plays her father. I think it was Robert Brewster. The scenes with him is very, very generic, and the way that ends is really just lifeless. Never reaches any sort of emotional outcome there. And you've got her partner, who I think his name was Scott in the film. He was terrible as well. The guy that played him, and that character was just terrible. The writing in this film is really awful. So they mainly focus on this. They kind of make this romance. They focus on this romance throughout the film between Claire Danes and Nick Stahl, and it's really, really poor. The romance, unfortunately, the way it's written, I did not care about this romance at all. There was no chemistry really, and the exposition as well. They had like this backstory, which first of all really undermines Terminator 2. John Connor, because it makes him seem like a dickhead. If what she's saying is true, which as I said before, these 3 Terminator films I'm going to ignore completely in terms of the timeline and everything. But yes, it kind of makes him seem like very unlikable. John Connor, what he was like then. It kind of just tries to ruin his character. What she says and stuff, and what he was like. And they keep latching onto this line. I can't remember what it was. It was about a basement or something. They keep going on about. That's basically the romance backstory. They keep repeating this line, and their first kiss or something. It's really, really cringy. First of all, very one note, and just uncomfortable, and as well just lifeless. I did not care about the romance in this film. And Arnold in this film is really one of the only things I can praise, because he is good. He's the only one that's actually funny at times. But some of the comedy again, it goes way too far. Even so with Arnie, and there's a bit at the end where he kind of turns bad, and he's back back to good again. It's very off tone, and I don't actually think that worked at all. But for the most part, though, Arnie is good. Nowhere near as good as he was in the first 2, but he does deliver, and that's really all I could praise about this film. Actually, praise. It's just Arnie. Arnold is really good in this film. Everyone else, though, and the main narrative is very, very weak. Again, hanging on to what's set up in 1 and 2 in a cheap way. The effects are awful. All of the action is very, very just underwhelming, generic, but actually at times very bad action. With a mix of CGI as well. Very unbelievable action. The villain is awful. Really don't know what they were doing there. It does try and reach an emotional ending, and I felt something, but really it was very lackluster. Even the ending, the voiceover and stuff. Music was kind of good at the end though, and some of the shots, the way it ended. But really, it's disappointing final act even, and there's so many things wrong with this film. It really it's better than Terminator Salvation because it does have somewhat of a humanity in places, and Arnie's good. No one was good in Salvation, for me, to be honest. Arnie's good in this film, and it's just not quite as awful as Salvation. But really, that's not praise. This is still a really bad film. It's not just bad; it's really bad. Yes, and if you've seen it before, you'll know what I'm on about. There will be people that like it, and that's fine. Nothing against that. But I really hate this film. Not as much as Salvation though, and probably I won't like it less than Genesis because I really don't have any high expectations of that. I've not seen it yet, but I'm holding out for that to be the worst, actually. So really, overall, this film is very, very disappointing. Even worse than I remembered, and I didn't, hold it in high regard before. I never really liked it too much, but this really just is a lot worse than I imagined on a rewatch. It's such a lifeless film, as a sci-fi, as an action, as a way to bring humanity to sci-fi, which was what Cameron done with the Terminators. This really fails on every level, apart from, some of them ending parts, some of them were not awful. And Arnie in this film, he's good, he's really good at times. But really, all of the characters, as I said, paper thin and annoying, actually, very annoying. One note, poor exposition, the writing in this film is awful. Cheesy, generic, and just dumb as well. Her father in it, Kate's father, is awful. Very, very bland, and just B grade acting throughout the entire of this film, really. Entirety of this film for most of the characters, including the villain, weak villain. Nick Stahl, I couldn't really imagine a worse choice for John Connor. Really, really awful performance. And all of the side characters as well are crap. Very, very generic. But this film, it turns into such a boring, road trip film, really, for the most part. And then, it just doesn't amount to anything that means anything. And for that reason, I'm going to have to give this a 27%. Really, really bad. It's not quite the level of Salvation, as I've said, but that doesn't affect the score. It is really bad still, and that's, these films, should never have been made, as I've said. They really were mistakes, and I'm glad it's going to be getting a reboot now, Terminator, the franchise. But really, this is a dreadful film for the most part, and really only redeemed in places by Arnie. And yes, some of that final act isn't quite, awful, but most of the film is pretty awful and bad, and it never reaches the level where it sustains any sort of meaningful drama. It's very, very immature, teenage kind of whiny drama, you could say, and the romance really highlights that. Awful direction really by Jonathan Mostow for the most part. It wasn't directed well. The editing at its best is just standard. There's nothing good about the editing really. The way it's shot as well. That's another thing. The cinematography, once again, is so shallow compared to 1 and 2. As I've said with Salvation, they just tone it down. It's not quite as bad cinematography as that, but it's just lifeless. There's no depth to the cinematography. I just think Terminator 2, everything involved, the lighting, the colours and everything, the tone, every shot, and stuff, and the way the action was some of the best action ever put to cinema. Really, this is a disgrace that this film was made in this manner, and considering the budget as well, what happened there, really shocking stuff. I was shocked, but I was even more shocked with Salvation. So yeah, not the worst Terminator film, but really, really bad still. And if you've not seen it and you don't really know what to expect, I wouldn't recommend it. And if you have seen it, tell me what you think in the comments. I'd be interested in, because I know there is a kind of a cult fan base out for, well, you could say for most films out there, but some of these Terminator films, people say they're not as bad as people make out, and I'll be respect in the comments. Whatever you think, it's fine. But for me, I hate this film, and it's not even enjoyable to watch. The campiness and stuff. It's just lifeless for me, and 27% is a really low score for me. I've not been seeing a lot of great films recently. Some I've been consistently seeing a lot of crap films, unfortunately. But I didn't expect much from this film. And yes, Terminator 3, really, really bad. And once again, another Terminator film that is throwaway for me. But yes, thanks for watching my review of Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines.